So my journey to veganism was 11 years. It started with seeing the documentary Earthlings at the end of 2007. It took a couple years for me to completely cut meat out of my diet. I started with all other meats except for chicken. That was the hardest for me. And then, so did that over maybe 2 years. And then for a good chunk of years, I was, I guess, technically pescatarian. I've never been a huge fan of seafood and egg. So, as I started to build build up my cooking skills and get better at that, I would eat, or I would cook vegan or vegetarian meals during the week. And then if my husband and I went out on weekends, I might have, a piece of fish and chips, maybe some egg. And then on our honeymoon in New York City, we dined at Iron Chef Morimoto's restaurant, and I had what I would call the best seafood meal of my life. And I told myself, it's not going to get any better than this. So I may as well leave on a high note. So that was my last seafood meal. And then from there, it was just dairy. So, my favorite foods are pizza and ice cream, big dairy foods. But I have had an undiagnosed digestive condition for many, many years that has, just gone unidentified by my health team. I've done over tests, and I believe it's underactive stomach. I learned about this condition after I went vegan. But in any case, it sort of in the spring of 2018, I had this really bad bout of acid reflux. That's one of the symptoms in the middle of the night. And I was like, I got to go back to my naturopath and figure this out. So she actually recommended I do a food sensitivity test. So I did this test, found out that I was sensitive to dairy, as I later discovered most people of color are. And so I cleansed these foods out of my diet for 4 months, and then you're supposed to integrate them back in, see which ones are triggering. But, after that 4 months, I was like, well, I have always wanted to be vegan, and I can do dairy for 4 months. Or without dairy, I should say. And so I was like, I can do this forever now. So that was sort of the moment I count from being vegan, spring 2018. And then of course, from there, made steps not to purchase animal-based clothing, personal products, and so on. It's been a 4.5 year journey for me.
Did you think you were looking right back to when you first saw Earthlings? Was that kind of always the intention? Did you always plan to get where you got to in 2018?
I don't think I made the declaration that I want to be vegan after seeing the documentary. But what was actually pretty powerful was at the end of the screening, they had a Q&A. There was somebody from the Vancouver Humane Society there to answer questions. And somebody in the audience asked her, what is one thing we can all do to help the animals in this situation? And she said, stop eating meat. So that really impacted me. And for a while I was like, if I can get to the point where I'm vegetarian, that's great. And then somewhere in that, in those couple years when I first started, that's when I started seeing all the other documentaries, Cowspiracy, What the Health, and reading the books, the China Study. And then I realized, going vegan is really at least for me, the ideal lifestyle that I wanted to live, because going completely dairy and egg free as well, is, for so many ethical reasons. Just the lifestyle that I wanted to pursue. I never put a timeline on it, but it took me 11 years. There you go.
And obviously, there's a strong ethical reason, like you mentioned, but you also mentioned the health reasons. Did the health benefits that you expected and wanted to come? Did they come? Did you feel better on this particular diet?
I have in recent years learned to manage my condition, and so my condition, I would say, is completely separate from my transition to going plant-based. And so when I learned about this condition, underactive stomach, I learned that animal products does, activate it, or it's one of those triggers. And so that even for me, even more was the reason why I would like to try and stay on this for good. What else was I going to say? yeah, anyways, I lost my train of thought, but that's okay.
Did people come along with you on the journey? You mentioned your husband in there as well, but did people come along with you?
No, they haven't. And I would say, yeah, I mean, I've screened a couple of the documentaries at my sister's place because my husband and I don't have Netflix, so we sort of we hop over to her house, and that's where I get to see them. And so yeah, they've seen some of these alongside me, and I know everybody's on their own journey, and so I don't try and pressure folks if they have questions for me. I mean, I've had a number of friends ask me, where can I eat plant-based, whatever, and then I'm happy to give my recommendations. But if people are open to learning more, I'm over these 11 years I've amassed a bit more knowledge. So and I've actually, because the number of resources just keeps growing, I've put together my own resource list up on my website, so that I can now refer these folks to that web page, and they can find all of the films that I've seen and all the books that I recommend and so on. But yeah, when it comes to the family gatherings, I always I take care of myself. I bring the token, the vegetable entree dish and the dessert. And what's great is we have a local company called Como Comfort Foods. They sort of make these frozen dishes. So like your shepherd's pie, your lasagna, and then you stick it in the oven. And I was asked 3 times at Thanksgiving, not this year, but last year. They're like, "This is plant-based?" Because it just the beef quality, I guess, whatever they were using was so good. And and so I like impressing my family that way, and just in the little way that I can urge them towards eating plant-based.
Did the friends and family did they get it, even though they weren't on the journey with you? Did they kind of look at you slightly oddly, like when you bring along your vegan dish?
No, I mean, because I've been used to this for so long. I think they get it. Every now and then, my mom confuses seafood with still being vegetarian.
Right.
There was one family gathering. She made a noodle dish, a Filipino noodle dish called pancit. Typically has chicken in it, and she's like, "I made it vegetarian for you." And I looked, and it's got shrimp in it, and I'm like, "Oh, you tried." Right. You tried your best, Mom, but no, I can't eat that.
And tell us about some of the things you're involved in now, because you're doing all sorts. You're writing books, and you're into marketing and all kinds of stuff. So when did that kind of come about, and when did it sort of almost become veganized, if you like?
Yeah, I would say right around the time I went vegan 4 years ago. So that was the year I also closed my first business, Conscious Public Relations. And with that business, I was very much focused on working with clients who were socially and environmentally responsible. So integrating my personal values into business is not new to me. I've been doing this. Yeah, I've been in those circles for some time. But yeah, becoming vegan kind of, really kickstarted this other business path. So I would say a year and a half after I closed my business, I was doing some research, and of course, being vegan, I'm now following all of the news outlets. And at first I thought, well, what if I try and write for these outlets? That would be my next, let's try doing that. And I found not all of these outlets pay. Some of them pay per article, or you can apply for a job and you'll be a full-time staff writer. That's not the route I wanted to go. I was thinking of going more the freelance route. But I sat down to meditate. I was sort of discouraged by my research. And I'm thinking, I could maybe at best make a part-time income. And then just the booming intuitive voice came to me, and it was like, you're vegan now, and you're going to be writing forever, whether it's personally or professionally. And just put those two things together and go. So at the start of 2020, initially I launched a new business as The Vegan Copywriter. That was my initial brand, and just told everybody I knew, looking for vegan businesses to write for, send clients my way, and was really lucky to land my first few clients right away. And then I realized, there was a client who had worked with me in my PR business and wanted to work with me again. And she asked me, do I have to be vegan? And I realized, and I said, no, as long as your business is vegan. So I realized the V word is still, quite a bit of a mystery word to non-vegans, and I didn't want to put off people by that. So I changed my title, my brand, to the Content Doctor to make it a little bit more inclusive. So hopefully people know that I do content writing, and then when they come on my site and they see my ideal clients are vegan businesses, that's really my criteria. So that's the business that I run today. And thanks to the pandemic, I had more time on my hands, so I took some courses in book editing, formatting, indexing. I've always been fascinated about editing books. I mean, books are really the longest piece of content I could possibly work on. So I've got a suite of services now that I offer to self-published authors. And then, I'm a published author myself. So my first book, I launched a year after I closed my PR business, and I didn't really make a big splash of that book because it's about public relations, and I didn't want to send people my way because I had already closed my business. But with this book, Vegan Marketing Success Stories, it's the world's first book about vegan marketing, and I'm really excited about that. Really proud to include 47 the stories of 47 vegan businesses around the world that talk about how they market themselves. And because I found that there were some gaps, so not only is this sort of a compilation of stories kind of book, but it's also a practical guide. So if you're new to business, if you're new to marketing, you can pick this up and you can learn how to create your own marketing strategy. And I wanted at least one example of a business with each marketing tactic. And there were a bunch of tactics that I talk about that the contributors didn't talk about because they're just not using that right now. I also pulled from online and added another 36 or so examples and got the permission to use those. In total, there are about 80 companies mentioned in the book. The paperback and audio just came out on World Vegan Day, and the ebook has been out for a while.
Awesome. I'm really fascinated by this subject. Like, who are the vegan businesses trying to talk to generally? And I think that's questions like, it comes from a place of I can imagine many vegan businesses, the obvious answer is they're trying to talk to vegans. But in your experience, are they also trying to talk to beyond that? And then I suppose the follow-up to that is, what's working in that kind of space? Because I'm always fascinated by talking to non-vegans effectively.
Mm-hmm. So I don't remember any stories saying we only market to vegans or the other side too. We market to everyone or to omnivores. I think generally they are marketing to everyone. And a lot of them talk about how they, for example, Immaculate Vegan in the UK is an e-commerce store. Blogging is a big part of their strategy, and they talk about the reasons why you should use plant-based products versus the animal alternative. And so more of that educational, that storytelling, kind of tactic. And I think that's a great way to go, because if you're only marketing to vegans, we're still a very small percentage of the population, right? So, and if that is your market, you've identified that, great. But I think, the more that we can urge everybody else along, then that's good for all of us. It's win-win.
Can you tell us about some of the tactics that you've seen that kind of work then? Like what's resonating with people, with audiences?
So the two longest chapters are public relations and digital marketing. And so that just tells me this is what most companies are doing right now. They're using some sort of PR. So whether it's reaching out to media, working with influencers, creating their own media like podcasts and such, putting out books, and then digital marketing. So, from social media to email to blogging, all of that. Those are most of the tactics that the contributors talked about.
And is there anything that in your experience from a marketing point of view just doesn't work, hasn't landed, any pitfalls for companies out there?
Well, because this is a book about success stories, not failure stories, I didn't really collect much data on what doesn't work for us. I would say my one great failure to success story is one of the company is called Vicado. They're in Toronto, Canada, and they sell plant-based food for dogs and cats. And so they came across a great study that showed that sled dogs performed very well on plant-based food. And so they wanted to share the information about the study, and they posted a photo of sled dogs. And so that did not resonate well with their audience. But yeah, they quickly rectified that, apologized. They took down the post. I actually don't always recommend you do that. Take down your post, because sometimes honesty is a good tactic in marketing. Yeah. But yeah, that's the course that they went, and and it actually helped them to build more engagement with their community in the end. So that's the one story that they called it a success story because they made a mistake, but they rectified it, and then it benefited them in the end.
And I guess that's like in our sort of modern era, where probably companies are talking to their customer base probably more than ever, in the past, with social media and, like you say, content creation, and they're appearing on, you talk about Immaculate Vegan, and we've had Annick's been on the show. So, the companies are everywhere. They're constantly talking to their kind of customer base. Does that sort of leave the door open then for potentially more kind of missteps, if you like, as the one that you've described there? And then is that in your experience, the best tactic, just, complete honesty and hold your hands up?
Yeah, if you make a mistake, I mean, what I've learned in PR from James Hogan, he's sort of this PR guru in Canada. His 3 rules are: number 1, do the right thing; number 2, be seen to do the right thing; and number 3, don't get it mixed up. So what a lot of your big corporations will do is greenwash, to be like, we're, look at our great sustainable product. And then you look on the back and it's got tons of chemicals and toxins. And it's like, you as a consumer, I would say you really got to be wary of things like that. But I think, especially for the small business owners, when you're taking folks on a journey, you're just starting out. Like me, I'm still only like just under 3 years in business. You're taking people on a journey, showing them where you're at. You make a mistake, you show the mistake, you correct the mistake, and then you move on. And as you grow, I think that's really how you build, you build that loyal following, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thinking about the book, I mean, you mentioned there's an absolute ton of businesses and success stories that you've included in the book. What was the research process like for that? Because I imagine it was fairly painstaking.
So initially I just came up with a few dozen of my own like dream companies that I wanted to approach. And, I'm subscribed to quite a few, newsletters. So, your Vegconomist, Vegan Women's Summit, Green Queen. And I realized because I wanted to get a good range of companies from around the world, I wanted to get, almost every continent if I could. I didn't quite get there, but, I realized that, there are companies in Asia or South America or Africa that I probably don't know about. And so I relied a lot on these newsletters that I received to sort of add to my list. And so in my mind, I wanted to build a list of 200 to maybe get 50 case studies. That list ended up growing to almost 280 just because if the company came back and said, no, we don't want to participate for whatever reason, or I just didn't hear back from them, I would just go on and reach out to another company. So the list just kept getting longer and longer. When I received those 47 stories, and then as well as putting in my own research, just looking online, I felt like I had a substantial enough book. And then at some point you just got to stop the process. So otherwise you'll take you forever to finish. Right. So
what were the ones that kind of stood out for you? Was there any that really kind of knocked you off center?
The one that I mentioned, Vicado, was great. Yeah, one that I've already mentioned on a few podcasts, but Meredith Marin at Vegan Hospitality. So she's in the U.S. and she's absolutely amazing. A number of years ago, I guess she relocated to Aruba. And almost single-handedly, managed to make the island vegan friendly. So she did a lot of local media appearances to talk about the importance of veganism. Got the chance to partner with some restaurants and help them create vegan menus and dishes. And because of that, she was able to get more media coverage in travel magazines. So these are in every hotel room and the back of the airline seats. She taught vegan cooking classes. Like, she spoke at every opportunity she could about veganism. And then she partnered with the Aruba Tourism Authority to sponsor an influencer trip. So in 2018, they brought 6 vegan influencers from, I'll say, around the world. I think mostly North America, brought them to Aruba, showed them a good time. And some of that content is still some of the top ranking on Google if you search for, vegan Aruba. And so Happy Cow, which is the app that, a lot of people use to locate vegan restaurants and such. So Happy Cow named Aruba the most vegan friendly island in the Caribbean. And that's really all due to Meredith and whoever she has on her team. So her company, Vegan Hospitality, now works with other ambassadors. So if, you've got, wherever you live, you want to build that community in your area, you can learn all of the tactics that Meredith uses. That's one of the ones that stands out for me.
Wow, what a story. Incredible. Much of making an entire island.
It makes me want to go there. Yeah.
When you think about the number of companies that you researched in this, and you said that list just kept growing and you kind of almost had to cut it off, were you kind of surprised by what was out there in terms of companies? Because there's probably a bunch we can all list off of companies we'd expect to be doing vegan things and so on and so forth. But were there any that you thought, I didn't even know that existed, or I didn't know that could be veganized? Did you kind of have a bit of a learning journey along the way from that point of view?
I wouldn't say there were any companies that surprised me in terms of offerings, but I would say most of the companies on that list, I wasn't familiar with, because like I said, I had my own list, but I'm in Vancouver, Canada, so I'm only familiar with probably most of the big names in North America, or that are available to me in the grocery store. I would say a lot of these companies, I didn't know about. And it's only because I had read about them online that I learned about them. Another cool company that comes to mind is Blue Tribe in India. Okay. So they make plant-based meat alternatives. And the story that they included in the book was doing a native advertising campaign. So they partnered up with an online network. I forget the name, but they have a number of online shows, YouTube shows. One of them is called OK Tested. And so they have 3 hosts who are not vegetarian or vegan in any way. And so they did a taste test sort of segment where they had them taste the meat version and then Blue Tribe's alternative. And so they had 3 sets of dishes, and 2 out of those 3 dishes, the hosts were fooled. They thought that the plant-based was the meat alternative. And I love that story. And it's an example that comes up quite a few times in the book about social proof. So I love it when companies use that covert tactic where they're like, here's some great food, and people think it's meat, and then they taste it and like, oh yeah, this is a great sausage. This is a company in the UK that does this very well, and they rely a lot on those publicity stunts. So I put a couple of their stories in the book. I love those stories because it just shows you that the average person, they want to eat these foods because of taste, not because of the cruelty that goes along with the creation of this food. And so if by them saying this plant-based version tastes great, I think it's meat. It just kind of shows you how well we can compete with animal-based foods.
Difficult to say, I appreciate with this next one, but when you think about all the different ways you could communicate a message with your, the public. And you could talk about environment, you could talk about animal welfare, you could talk about the taste, you could talk about all these different things. And I appreciate it completely depends upon the company and so on and so forth. But are there kind of broad strokes, things that are more effective, would you say, in terms of communication? Like, does the environment land better with people, like, and probably more so non-vegans, than, say, talking about animal welfare? Is there a particular kind of trend or theme that you've noticed?
In terms of folks in the book, I didn't really get too much data around that. So I can't say, but just generally in terms of what I'm seeing, a lot of vegan companies post, I think it really varies. I think folks have started to learn that the animal angle is not working as well. Although folks like VFC in the UK, they do it very well because their at least their initial product focus was chicken. And so and that's part of their name, VFC, right? So so they're really on the the chicken activism. But I think, I've seen some folks now try and go more into the environment angle because things are not doing so well in terms of natural disasters and such here. And so, trying to urge people to go more plant-based that way. I think it's all great, but as a company, you really have to figure out the messaging and strike that balance too between education and activism and what your audience is expecting, because I don't think you can go 100% activism. Otherwise, you're still selling products and services in the end, right? So,
100%. Is the communication tactics generally similar around the world? Because you mentioned obviously you've got examples from all over the globe. Would you say that there's generally speaking, vegan companies are talking to people in a similar way, or are there other regional differences?
I would say the tactics are pretty similar. I know that there are a lot of cultural differences in how, there's socialist companies like Cuba that you'll never see an ad there because they just don't allow it. But for the most part, I think like I said before, public relations and digital marketing, those were the longest chapters. That's what most of these companies talked about using. And so, I didn't see much of a difference. That being said, the book is very heavy on North America and UK. I've got a couple in India, one in Mexico, a couple in Israel. I was hoping to get more of a spread, but that's just how it turned out. So,
thinking about the digital prospects, I know, speaking to many kind of business owners who are starting out on their journey, that it almost becomes it almost envelops sometimes what their core offering is, this kind of feeling that they need to create a digital, they almost become content creators, if you like, and they're sort of almost I wouldn't say fearful, but it almost becomes like I say, something that envelops the main purpose of what they're doing, and then they sometimes have a little moment of, is the juice worth the squeeze here? Am I doing the right thing? Are there kind of any top tips that you would give businesses who are starting out in that particular sphere from a digital marketing perspective, from your experience?
I think as much content as you can put out is the way to go. And I still struggle with this. Like I don't want to be a 24/7 reality show. So I'm just not in it for that. But I think you have to figure out what works for you. Like I'm a solopreneur. I don't yet have, somebody on a marketing team that I can hire to do my own posting. And I am my own brand too. So I just have to, be aware of where my bandwidth is, and I can only do as much as I can do. There are other companies that, they are their own media empire. So an example is Midday Squares. It's a functional chocolate bar company in Montreal, Canada, and they have been ambitious from day one. So they're like, we're out to compete with Hershey's and all the top 5. Like we want to be one of the top 5 chocolate companies in the world. I share in the book how their second hire on the operations side, before they even hired a sales salesperson was a videographer, because they knew that content and documenting everything that was happening in their company, good and bad, wins and failures, was going to be a huge part of their strategy. So just if you don't have never heard of Midday Squares before, just hop on. I would say Instagram is probably their most engaged platform, and they'll give you some ideas on on how you can maybe change up your own content, because they show everything, and then they also have their own podcast. I know they took a break for about a year because they were focused on raising capital, so that took a lot of their resources, but I think they're at least trying to get back on the monthly monthly frequency, but just documenting, storytelling, showing people as much behind the scenes as you can, as well as of course your products and services. I think that's a great way to go from day one.
And is there an element of like companies having to develop a thick skin around being comfortable building in flight, in sort of modern times, from what you've seen, like, and particularly around content creation, because it's a skill you kind of learn. And like you say, many people start out, they haven't got a videographer, they haven't got the resources to expand into like a full content creation team. Myself included, outside of my own podcast, I run a business myself, and I am the content creating department as well as the finance department, and all the other aspects, like many people are, and I'm sure you can relate. But is it kind of a key skill to be comfortable with, the finished article is never going to come if you don't put things out?
Yeah, 100% agree. Like, I'm an introvert and I'm a writer by trade. And so of course I'm more comfortable blogging. Like, that's my, my sweet spot. But I've learned to, use Instagram Reels and get on a 60-second video, because I know that, especially with me being my own brand, showing your face is very important. People want to see your face. They want to hear your voice. Before they hire you. And so, again, you've got to learn how to, even if you're introverted, step in front of the camera. And again, a lot of these platforms, Instagram, TikTok, they're all short form anyway, unless you plan to become a YouTuber. You only have 60 or 90 seconds anyway. So, so don't worry about, sort of the long form video content, unless that's part of your strategy, of course.
Yeah. Can we just switch gears into the editing side of books and so on? Because I'm kind of fascinated by you getting into that, like you said, over the pandemic and so on and so forth. What's that kind of journey been like? Is that, like you said, that's probably a natural home for you from a content point of view, the longest form content you could get. What's that journey been like for you?
It's been great. I mean, I haven't worked on too many books, but I absolutely love editing. Even when I was in my PR business, when I had a client, give me an article to edit before it got published, it's really one of my favorite things to do. And I tell people I'm a content writer, because most people will hire folks to write. Not many will hire editors. So, and so that's why I went into book editing. I was taking my course. My uncle, who's a hobby genealogist in the U.S., has been able to trace back his family history to, I believe, the 13th century in Europe, which is quite impressive. And so he had 3 volumes of a book series ready, and he's like, I'm ready to put these out. I need your help. So it was great to get some practice on his books. And then I've since edited a few now, and I would love to work with more vegan authors. Spiritual authors is another group of folks that those are my favorite genres. Vegan, spiritual, memoir, and nonfiction. If you're listening to this, you're not vegan, but you've got a book you need edited. I'm happy to work with you as well.
There's seems to be, to me anyway, a real rise in kind of vegan authorship. Is that something you've noticed as well?
Yes. I would say we could use more diversity in the types of vegan books. That's probably one of the reasons why I published mine, because it's the second vegan business book in the world, followed by Katrina Fox's Vegan Ventures. But yeah, I mean, there are tons of vegan cookbooks. I have a list that I'm going through right now of vegan memoirs. Some folks recommended these memoirs to me when they weren't really memoirs. They were more like nonfiction books or anthologies, so collections of stories or essays. But yeah, I really love the memoir genre. So I just finished reading The Gentle Barn by Ellie Lax. She runs a sanctuary called My Gentle Barn in the US. I think they have 3 locations. And just the story of her, having an affinity for animals since childhood and then taking that all the way to building a sanctuary with 3 locations it's so amazing to me. So if you're a vegan out there, you've got a great story, memoir, we need more memoirs out there, I think. Just so that people know that vegans aren't just like, oh, I'm an activist. And now, it's not just all about activism. Like vegans are still everyday people. We run businesses, we do other things. And I think we need to get more of those types of stories out there. Yeah.
Yeah. There's certainly it's interesting you mentioned about the business books, because I had no idea, but now you say it, I can't think of, well, there is, like you say, there's 2. I can't think of any. But up until recently, vegan fiction was one that I would say, that there isn't any vegan fiction. But now that seems to be turning a corner as well. Yes. There seems to be more and more vegan fiction out there.
Yeah, I'm not paying attention to fiction just because it's not on my radar at all. But I'm sure, yes, I know of at least a few vegan fiction authors now. But yeah, I was speaking more on the nonfiction front there.
Yeah, 100%. Editing something, from a I've never done it, but apart from editing podcasts, I've never edited anything kind of written. Certainly not a book. Is part of the skill not just obviously the functionality of whether something is grammatically correct and so on and so forth, and the word count and all that kind of stuff, but I guess there's a real skill in making sure that you capture exactly the essence of what the author intended.
Yeah, and that goes for businesses as well. I think I love editing for businesses because I like to preserve their voice as much as possible. But I think when, in the same way that we speak, we tend to write with a lot more words than we need to. And so cutting away a lot of those filler words that get in the way of that core message. I really enjoy doing that. And then for books, again, it's just a lot of the editing work, as you said, aside from fixing spelling and grammar, is querying the author. So making sure, is this what you meant when you said that? Or can we say it a little bit better? And sometimes I'll make suggestions. So that's the kind of editing that I do. And then there's also you have to adhere to certain styles. But that's why I like working with self-publishing authors, because you can break rules, you can do whatever you want. So compared to when you work with a traditional publisher, their team is going to handle all of that. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, so I hadn't really thought about that. So yeah, if they're publishing through a publishing company, there's a third party in the conversation. So the dialogue isn't just you and the author, right?
Well, it'll be the editor and the author. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's different types of editors as well. So there's copy editing, which I do, and then there's developmental editing, which is shifting entire sections of a book around. So potentially shifting chapters around or shifting paragraphs within a chapter around, and that's not really my sweet spot. So
yeah. Well, it's a whole new world to me, to be honest. just to go back to the marketing side of things, and to start to round us out, because I was conscious of time. But thinking about where some top tips for companies, is there any that you'd recommend, sort of as we start to sort of summarize that have come from the book?
Well, the biggest thing I learned about, hearing from all of these stories of these companies is that no marketing strategy is the same. Everybody
Right.
uses a different combination of tactics. It's fascinating, and you have to figure out what that cocktail is for you and your business, right? Because you can use the exact same tactics at the exact same time, use the exact same budget as your competitor, and it still might not work out for you because your audience is going to be slightly different. So, I say, just you got to come up with a strategy, test it out, find out what works for you, cut out what doesn't. I think that's the number one thing I learned, from writing this book.
Love it. Great advice. Where do folks go to get hold of a copy then, Sandra?
Ebook is everywhere online where you buy ebooks. The paperback, I would prefer you get on Lulu, lulu.com. And the audiobook is on Audible.
Awesome. It's been great chatting with you. Thank you so much. Is there anywhere else that folks can find you? Because I'm sure you're out and about in various guises, so it'd be good to make sure people know.
Yeah, everywhere with my name, sandranomoto.com. Same thing on social media. And I've collected all of the book links there, so you can also just hop on my website and find everything there as well.
Amazing. Sandra, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. You're welcome.